Welcome to Women of Color Roar Radio Show. I'm your host, Angela D. Joseph, and today we're talking about journalism. But this is the show that talks about people, politics, and policy. And it's particularly important that we address what's going on in our fourth estate right now. So, journalism is at the top of mind. And my first guest on the show is the president of the Hispanic Journalists of San Diego, and that is Laura. And I'm going to let her say her last name.
Castenada.
And Laura is going to talk about, we're going to talk about the state of journalism, which obviously is something that we all need to be very concerned about. But seasoned, lifelong journalists are losing their jobs. Some are quitting because they don't want to go along with what's going on. But Laura has a story to tell, and we're going to delve into what happened to her at the Union Tribune. So, welcome to the show, Laura.
Thank you for having me. Means a lot.
We really appreciate it. And I just want to say that, we met during the time, I believe, when I was doing cultural competency in the newsroom over teaching that class at the Union Tribune. And later on, we stayed in touch, and you were on the staff of the opinion, the editorial.
The editorial board.
The
Yes.
editorial board. And we know that the Union Tribune has gone through a lot of changes in the last couple of years. So first, let's talk about who you are so the audience can find out. Tell me a little bit about your start in journalism.
Well, I actually started in my hometown of Chicago. I'm not a native of San Diego. I got very lucky and started out my first job at the ABC station in Chicago right out of school. And that was huge because I was working with a lot of veteran, top-notch journalists in Chicago, which is very multi-ethnic. So I really learned a lot just working alongside them and watching them. Decided that I wanted to try my hand at reporting, and you can't do that in a market like Chicago. So everybody that was rooting for me helped me put my best tape together. I shopped it around all over the country, and I left and ended up in Tucson, Arizona, which is a great border town and a great news town. Went to the dusty desert, learned everything I could, started going to Mexico a lot to cover stories. And eventually, coming from Chicago to go to Tucson, I was a little bit, it wasn't as entertaining to live in Tucson, Arizona for me. I was younger at the time. So I made another move to San Diego. It was a wonderful move in 1995. I came here and was accepted by this community so much as a reporter at KGTV, where I stayed for about 4 years and then went on to do my own thing, started a show that aired on KPBS for a while, started teaching at City College, eventually became a professor, full-time professor in the radio, TV, film department, and then did a little stint at San Diego State, and then heard about this position at the San Diego Union Tribune under the old ownership when Patrick Soon-Shiong owned it, the same owner of the Los Angeles Times. And that's where I met you when you did that training. This current company would have never hired you to do something like that, but the other one did.
Well, it was the publisher, the
Yes,
editor
that's
publisher
right.
at the time. It was Jeff.
That's right. And,
And
and I just want to add that he hired me, and it was really, really made clear that Jeff and the people that, the management that were around him, they realized how horribly the communities of color in San Diego had been treated by the San Diego Union Tribune and the previous managers, and they wanted to do something about it. And that was one of the reasons that I felt really good about going over there and trying to be a change agent and try to make things better, because I knew my community and your community and all the other communities of color deserved it.
well, I had the opportunity of being the vice president of the San Diego Association of Black Journalists for a season. But we came over to the Union Tribune when that cartoon ran, that was, problematic cartoon. And but the editorial board, Steve Breen, the cartoonist, were very receptive to our point of view, and that's when I made the proposal to the publisher editor at the time to give this class. And because I felt that a lot of times journalists, they're missing a part of the story when they're covering our communities. And so they need to understand what is not acceptable, how you go about covering our stories, and make some corrections in the way we're presented. And so I was happy to have been able to witness the growth in the Union Tribune. It's changed papers altogether in terms of being able to covering us more, being able to reach out to more experts. But then, of course, the sale happened, and then that completely shook up everything. So tell me about just that period when the sale happened, and then I know that the whole staff, well, not the whole staff, most of the staff seemed to have left. So,
It was a very ugly transition. I'm not going to lie. We didn't know what to expect. You never do, right? But this new company came in on a Monday, and we were told that the paper had been sold, and they gave people a week to take a buyout, and they were giving them a week's pay for every year they'd been there. And it was just shocking. It was insulting. And I think a lot of people that had been there for 20 years just didn't, with that, just hearing that, they just didn't feel good about staying there. So a lot of them were smart and they took this buyout. It didn't benefit me because I had only been hired in 2020. So I decided to stay on and see what was going to come next. And it was ugly. It was an ugly transition. We lost half the staff. Our editorial board went from 7 to 4.
hmm.
And you can't do the same amount of work with 4 people and fill the same number of pages. So there were some adjustments made, but we were clearly not the same board. We were clearly not holding people accountable the way we were before. We were not able to read and accept as many opinion pieces, which means voices are being left off the table. So I was concerned about that from the get-go, and it just got worse and worse and worse over the next months that came.
Well, one of the wonderful editorial pieces that came out was, I believe it was like Community Voices. That was
Yes.
so you had people from different communities writing and in the paper, and now that went away. So what happened? It's one day you just get a memo saying we're not doing that anymore.
Well, that was ugly too. I'm not going to lie. I was the project manager for that whole entire thing, the Community Voices project, under Jeff Light. He had established he made contact with a bunch of community leaders and put together this group
And
where
Jeff
they,
Life was that was the publisher editor.
yes, the
Yeah.
former publisher editor, where they could write, community folks could write about any topic as often as they wanted to write. And a lot of people are not professional writers, and that was the beauty of this thing. Like those of us that were professional writers on my team and that were helping with this project, we would help them bring those pieces so that they could be published. Make sure they were fact checked, make sure that the grammar is all there, that everything that they're trying to say is said. And it was going really smoothly. We were adding new people. We were up to 70 writers. I included additional names: high school students, college students, more women of color, more communities of color, LGBT community, old, young, different religions. It was really just a wonderful melting pot. And then when this new company came over, at first they didn't do anything or say anything about it. And then about 9 months into it, they put a new supervisor in charge of our editorial pages, and he's in Orange County, a guy that had a lot less experience than all of us, a guy who did not know San Diego. He's never lived here. He doesn't know the community and never made it a point to come down here to learn about the community. And so basically, he sent me a spreadsheet, and this spreadsheet had all the names of the people that were on the Community Voices project, how often they had written, when was the last time they wrote, and what political affiliation they were registered, what kind of voter they were registered at. And I had a real problem with that because they weren't just writing about politics. They were writing about community. They were writing about children. They were writing about education and immigration and just all kinds of topics. So I felt that was really unfair. He kept saying we need more conservative voices. And I was speaking my opinion about it, and I'm sure the uppers didn't like that. And then it just kind of fizzled out. He never officially got rid of the Community Voices Project, but he said he was going to revamp it. And I left before that ever happened. But what he did start to do was he said, I'm going to pick and choose which ones are going to be published. And that was not what that project said before. The project was, you can write, there is no, you we're going to run it, we're not going to run your piece will get published. We're just going to work with you on the editing
That's the
process.
whole point, that this is your authentic voice, not your
That's right.
censored, not the censored voice, but
Right.
an
And
authentic
and
voice.
that's what happened. They started censoring and mostly women and a lot of women of color. And then I was told that I couldn't run pieces that had the word genocide. One person wrote and I got a note that said, "Don't ever run her piece again. She sounds like a Hallmark card." I mean, just ugly, insulting things like that. And it just did not sit well with me
Did you
at all.
ever think that journalism would end up in this place? I mean,
No,
we heard about yellow journalism, and I mean, we're certainly aware of the propaganda type, the stations that are out there, but mainstream newspapers and television shows, news shows, leaning the way they're leaning,
this
and
is
being
not
really,
what I
really
signed
no
up for.
longer, and well, they went through that period when, remember, it was sort of like, oh, we have to have balance. It's like both sides. It's like you can look outside and it one side said it's raining and the other says another, but we have to show both sides. But
Right.
they did that for a while, and then it was like this shift that no, we're going to lean this way. Did you feel that happening at the Union Tribune?
Of course I did. And the thing is that what a lot of the community does not understand, and I always would speak to as many communities as they invited me to explain that the news side is not the same as the editorial and opinion side. We're in two separate, parts of the building, so to speak. And in editorial and opinion, that's what you get to do. You get to express your opinion. Now, you can't say the sky is orange if it's not, it has to be fact checked. But if it's your opinion about something, you absolutely should be able to say that, including the pieces that I've written. I wrote a piece about immigration. Well, I co wrote it with a colleague about a month ago, which again, I think is part of this whole retaliation thing that's gone on with me. And it was about immigration when they found that boat pulled up ashore in the Point Loma area, I believe it was somewhere on the north in the North County, and three children ended up dead when that boat capsized, and they were from India, I believe. And it was just disheartening to see that. And my colleague and I wrote a piece about how we really felt that it wasn't the smugglers that is the problem, but it's the immigration system that is so damn broken that people are willing to risk their lives to go through that. And we didn't ask anybody to run it. We published it. It didn't get stopped. But this last editorial that we tried to write did get stopped. It was
Yeah,
killed.
let's talk about that, the what happened, at the paper. So you were asked, it was to leave. That was you had your last day. But let's talk about what leaded up to that, because this had to do with covering of what happened up in Los Angeles, right?
Yes. So there was now only three people on the editorial board because we lost another girl last December. So there was a white male, there was another Latina, which is unprecedented to have the majority of people sitting on the board be Latinas. But my colleague grew up in Tijuana, so she has a very different viewpoint than I do. You have a Mexican American and another Latina that was raised in Tijuana. So two very different viewpoints, but good ones. And then you have a white male, and he was the principal writer, meaning we would discuss topics in the morning. He would do the actual writing and typing, and then we would convene again before it went to print to make sure that we were all on the same page. It's very much like the Supreme Court. I'm sure when they're talking about their opinions, they don't agree on everything, and neither did we. But we came to a consensus where the information was brought forth that morning. It was it was like Monday and Tuesday when all of the riots and the protests got out of control in Los Angeles. I was the first one that said we have to write an editorial about that. We must. And so we started working on it. We got it done early, and the principal writer felt that his gut was just telling them I better run it past this guy in Orange County to make sure that there's no issues. He just had a gut feeling, you know. Nobody said you have to do that, but he did it. And that was the guy, it was finished on Wednesday. On Thursday, midday, we got a note back from the new publisher, whose name is Ron Hassey of Southern California Media Group, who owns the paper under Alden Global Media, who's running the paper, saying that it was too one sided. Okay, well, once again, I go back to what is an editorial? It's an opinion piece. And so he said it wasn't running, that the piece would not run. And that was about noon. And by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm shut out of my computer, just can't log back in, thinking that it's an IT issue. I asked my colleague, hey, can you contact IT for me because I can't log on? And never in a million years did I even know that I was let go yet. And I get a call from the number two guy from Southern California Media Group around 5 o'clock in the afternoon telling me that my position has been eliminated. Now, you tell me if there's not a connection there. And I asked him right there on the phone if there was a connection between that, and he denied it. And I don't believe it for a minute.
There's no such thing as a coincidence, they say, right? And
No.
so that's a little bit of a
Great.
coincidence there.
Great.
But now the okay, let's just talk about what happened in Los Angeles. So, people were peacefully protesting, and so it took a turn. But I mean, how did you present that in your editorial?
Well, what we were trying to say, the message is that I think what has already come out a lot since then, the way that it happened, the way that it rolled out made things worse. The Trump administration did not need to go bulldozing in there and sending the military um, and ICE officers in full military gear ready for a riot when the riot hadn't happened yet. And it just, made the crowds uncomfortable. It made them defensive. And then things started getting out of control. There was looting. The mayor had not imposed any kind of what's the word I'm looking for?
Curfew.
A curfew. Thank you. She had not imposed that yet. And also, the governor of California was never notified. And that's the part that we also wrote about. Like, that is just absurd. That did not have to happen that way. It fueled the fire where the fire didn't need to be fueled.
Well, what you're talking about seems to be the new norm. We go back to when the Washington Post, when they were not allowed to publish their endorsement of Kamala Harris for president. In Los Angeles, we had the same, scenario happening. Recently, there was one of the cartoonists at the Washington Post when she did the cartoon of the oligarchs all bending the knee before President Trump, including her boss Jeff Bezos. That they pulled that cartoon, and I mean, she left because she felt her personal integrity was affected. But we're seeing now where the people that are controlling what's going into the news, they don't have news backgrounds. They don't have any real connection to the people who are their readers, but they are part of an oligarch, extreme billionaire class. And so their agenda is what is being shown in the news. Would you say that was true?
I would say that's
What I just
absolutely
said?
true. That's absolutely true. But you know what? We can do something about that.
Hey,
We
please, what can we do
support
about this?
independent journalism, in nonprofit journalism, which is really exploding.
Which is what we are on right now, by the way.
That's right.
JFM
That's right.
89.1 in San Diego. It's a nonprofit radio station, and that's why we're able to have this conversation.
And they don't get to set the agenda. They don't get to tell the narrative because that's not the narrative. And so listeners, readers, viewers, they have a choice when they subscribe to something. They have the power in their hands. And that is a big problem in all of our communities of color and women's groups and, groups we don't band together. I mean, where are we in the 60s again? We don't band together and say, we're not going to have this. You are not going to get away with this. We keep subscribing. We keep buying certain cars. We keep supporting these companies. That's where we have to put our power together and say, we're not going to support that type of controlled, censored journalism, but we're going to support the little guys who are actually telling the real stories that are out there, boots on the ground.
But it's also educating the
Yes,
public because they don't know where to go. Because
right.
you talk to people and they start telling you things, and you're like, that isn't true. Where did you hear that? And so, the media that they have that's on all day, that's what they're getting from
Yeah,
that media. So we have to let them know where to go to get the other perspective. And, which brings me to the rise of Substack. And unfortunately, people lost their jobs. And I was, saying Terry Moran, who's been on ABC forever, because the corporate people didn't like a tweet. You think about Don Lemon, when Don Lemon was interviewing Vivek Ramaswamy, and he was spewing incorrect history about Black people, and Don Lemon was disagreeing with that on air, and then he got a notice his job was over. And so,
yeah,
and then we saw Joy Reid, lose her job. We saw Katie Pang, lose her job. This is MSNBC that's supposed to be this alternative, but they really are also being controlled by the same oligarchy that owns all the media. So what do you think about this rise in alternate media? I mean, people can have their own YouTube channel, Patreon, Substack. What do you think of that?
I think that when you trust a journalist, you have to stick with that journalist because that journalist, Don Lemon's gone, but he's not going to stop telling the truth. Terry Moran's gone, but he's not going to stop telling the truth. The editors that walked off that paper in the Washington Post and elsewhere, they're not going to stop telling the truth. So I think it becomes more personal with a relationship. I have a voice, I have an opinion. I am well known in this community because I have always done community journalism. I have always made it a point wherever I've worked to try to speak for the voice of the people, let them have an opportunity to tell their stories. Community folks would always be calling me when I was at Channel 10, telling me about this problem and that problem. And we couldn't cover them all, but I was in plenty of boardrooms convincing those people who did not understand those communities why we should be covering that story. So I think that's it. It's really trusting in those personal connections that with the journalists that wherever they work, they're going to be telling you the truth, even though other people aren't going to like it. And you follow them and you support them.
Well, where are you going to be next? Where are we going to be following you?
You know what? I am kind of taking a break right now, Angela. I am working on a documentary because I am also a documentary filmmaker. And I couldn't publicly talk about it too much because it does involve a union story. It's my father's story, actually, in Chicago. But I'm free to work on it now. And so I'm going to work on that this summer and then kind of regroup. I'm leaving for Chicago in July and I'll be back at the end of the month in July and come back and roll my sleeves up and see what's next. But wherever I put my voice, I can tell you right now, I will not bow down to censorship and to someone trying to put a piece of tape over my mouth so that I don't tell the truth. That's not me.
I see Jerry has come on. So Jerry McCormick, are you on with us now?
I am.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. So Jerry McCormick is the founder of the San Diego Association of Black Journalists. And congratulations on 25 years, Jerry.
Yeah, it's a miracle.
That that is something else. So, I've been talking to Laura, which I know you all know each other.
Oh,
Uh,
that's my sister. Yeah.
and the Hispanic journalists and the Black journalists have always been there for journalists of color. And during this time where we're seeing all of these voices being extinguished and censorship in the media, I thought it was important for us to have this conversation. And now, Jerry, I know you have a lot of experience and you work with students, and Laura also teaches students. I want you all to just, since you're both on right now, I just want to talk about the future of journalism right now and where do you think it's going and how can we inspire the up and coming journalists to continue in this field?
Laura, do you want to go first?
Sure, and I'll keep mine short. I just think it's really difficult right now, not impossible, but difficult because there's they're not seeing hope. They're not seeing hope that there's jobs out there that they can actually make a living. Now there's so much censorship. So I would just say that I always try to tell students journalism is not dead, it's just different and it's changing. And so you just have to keep up with the technologies. And let's face it, we know a lot of them get their news from TikTok. I have young people living in my home that I'm constantly having conversations with them. It's not a bad thing to get it from TikTok as long as you can trust the person that's presenting it.
I agree with Laura. I kind of see well, first of all, I'm very terrified for people who are in journalism right now because Felon 47 is really wreaking havoc on the media. He's silencing voices, and the media is just capitulating to his whims. And it's just very scary times that we are living in. But it's good that people are standing up against him and not letting their voices be totally silenced. What I'm noticing, particularly in broadcast, is a lot of the trusted voices are being forced out. And what they're doing is they're creating their own platforms, independent media, where they can truly be themselves and truly give us the news that we want. I mean, you have Don Lemon, you have Jim Acosta, you have Joy Reid, Terry Moran, and these are legends in, or are still are, in this business. And the fact that, they're forcing these people out is just very scary. Now, as far as your question with students, I agree with Laura, journalism is changing. There is still room for them because what's happening is they are going younger and cheaper, and they don't realize that experience counts. But what's disheartening to me is the public is okay with it. They're okay with just stuff thrown up on the internet, and that bothers me. I grew up, well, all of us appear to be of a certain age where we read the newspaper, we knew we could trust what was in the newspaper, we knew what we could trust what was on the nightly news. And now I look at the news and I see just all sorts of errors. I watched a report not that long ago where a reporter here locally did this whole story and she never said where she was in San Diego. And it's like context matters, proximity matters, location matters. Tell me where this happened. And she did not once say it. It wasn't on the lower third. It could have been in any neighborhood in San Diego. And like stuff like that should never slip by because you're doing your audience a disservice.
Also, I think a lot of younger journalists are being asked to do five jobs for the price of one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If you happen to work at a place where they do things in two languages, people that speak Spanish, write Spanish, and read Spanish are not being paid a differential or anything extra to do that job in two languages. And that's absurd to me. I have a problem with that.
Well,
Absolutely.
and in addition to, I mean, going to the five jobs, I mean, when all of us were like really in it, we would have to just focus on one thing. Now they have to do a video, they have to post on social media, they have to write a web story. Then, if they're in broadcast, produce a package. And then sometimes they're doing two and three stories a day. Well, at that breakneck pace, something's going to slip through the cracks. And again, the audience doesn't seem to care, and it just sort of feeds this narrative of you can't trust the media anymore.
Well, I remember when I started, we used to go out to cover a story with a crew.
Yeah.
Now it's a one-man band, right? It's like you have to set up your own lighting, you have to be your own audio person, you've got to, and you've got to wrangle your guest. And I mean, that's asking a lot.
You might have seen that in Yuma back in the day, but not in San Diego, California, and
Yeah.
Milwaukee. But now it is everywhere. I know there's been some concerns about safety, and so in some markets they've pulled back, especially at night, from having one-man bands or one-man women bands, whatever you want to call them. But it still is not in this day and age with all these things that are happening. Reporters being shot by rubber bullets, and their cameras toppled over, and it's
Being arrested,
being
being
arrested.
caught up in,
Wild West.
in the sweep.
Hmm.
Well, it's also disheartening too when we have, I won't name the station, but we had a local station that had some pretty big layoffs recently, and some trusted talent was pretty much shown the door. And then the other day, I'm looking on LinkedIn, and they're like, "Come work for us and be an MMJ." And then I looked at the salary, and I'm just like, "How can you survive off this salary here in San Diego, where prices are sky high, gas is high, rent is high?" I know someone right now who is renting a one bedroom, one bathroom apartment in Mission Valley, and it's like 700 square feet, and this person's paying $3,200 a month. And I looked at this person and I said, "That's a mortgage payment. You could get a house for, well, you used to be able to get a house
Not
here
anymore.
for that." And, this person said, "Well, that's the cheapest I could find in the area that I wanted." So, I mean, if you're paying reporters like 40, I'm just going to say $40,000 a year, that won't even, I mean, all of their money's going to go to rent. So, how are they supposed to eat? How are they supposed to buy clothes for themselves? And a lot of them, the stations aren't providing anything. They literally have to provide their own makeup, their own clothes, their own shoe. I mean, everything. And some have to even use their own equipment. I'm not saying necessarily here in San Diego, but I've heard that in other markets.
And even newspapers are just without training. I know they did that a lot in the like 2000s, just handing people a little digital camera saying, "Oh yeah, while you're out there doing that print story, grab some video too." And it's you're asking somebody to do a completely different job in addition to what they're already doing with no or little training. It's just disheartening to see it because I was lucky enough to work at a time, I think both of you early on, where we saw, real journalism, where the station would even pay for travel for you to go somewhere to really bring back an incredible story. I was part of that. Had a partner that worried about, took care of the shooting and the editing while I was focusing on the editorial part of the script and the presentation, and did some great work. But it's hard to do it that way when you're doing five jobs for the price of one. It's almost
But
impossible.
Laura, I wanted to say that it also is part of taking away the quality of journalism, because if they can get rid of the people that they have to pay money, because those people are seasoned journalists, and hire people who will take a low salary and do all these different jobs, so it's all of it is undermining the quality of journalism, because you're not able to do the in-depth stories that you used to do. You don't have people who have institutional knowledge at working at in these jobs anymore. And so what you're doing is you're providing the community with a lesser standard, and so people get used to, if it's not that good, then yeah, I may as well watch YouTube and TikTok. Because if I turn on the news, they're not that great. It doesn't look as great as it used to. And these are not the seasoned journalists that I trusted. So, Laura, before I let you go, and I talked to Terry, I wanted to know, um, is there anything that you want us to know? You told us the story of what happened at the Union Tribune. And what would you like, our audience to know about this market? Is there any media that we can trust here?
Well, I'll tell you what, there are a number of nonprofit newsrooms. The OB Rag, which has been around for a while, they were the first ones that called me when they heard about this. The Times of San Diego is just going through the roof with what they're doing, and they're also tying in with the Arizona State University to bring on more younger journalists and train them through a program, knocking it out of the ballpark. iNewsSource, knocking it out of the ballpark. They don't have a huge staff, but boy, when they break something, they break it. So I think, you just have to, television news has taken a big dive in terms of not being able to do these big, giant investigative pieces anymore. Maybe some consumer, but not investigative. So I would just say again to your listeners and the viewers to really, really think about where you're putting your money and think about those subscriptions and support local independent journalists because they need it and they're going to be serving your community the way these other entities are not anymore.
So, so now you've worked, you got a chance, you worked in print, you went over and worked in television, and now you're kind of doing like the corporate type of media. We're getting, publicity and that sort of
Right.
thing. So, having seen the different sides, what do you feel has really changed in this? It seems like we had this real change happen in the last 5 years.
I would put it further than that. I think 2008 was a turning point for the media
Mm,
because that's when we had the first well, not the first because we had the Great Depression, but we had a bad economic downturn. And companies started realizing, because it used to be, when we were younger, older meant quality and experience, and
mm.
you were highly sought after and highly favored. And then the companies realized, well, wait, I can hire two people who are younger and cheaper, who grew up editing video on the internet, know the internet for the price of this one person who, barely knows their way. And I'm not saying this is for all people, but
I know, but it's
barely
like
know
the
their way.
dinosaurs,
Yeah, yeah. And
yeah.
also, in theory, they'll stay longer. Well, that's not what's happening.
Mhm.
These young people, and this is what I'm seeing with my students, they'll graduate, they'll get these jobs, they'll stay maybe 2 or 3 years, and they're like, bump this, I can go and make more money doing X, Y, Z, and T and not work as hard. So
Right.
then it's this constant churn of, okay, well, we can hire some more kids and more kids. I am lucky because I train my students very well, but I have students working in newsrooms all across this city. 15 years ago, that would have been unheard of
Mm.
because you needed a certain degree of experience to get into these newsrooms.
Mhm.
Now it's like, can you read? Can you write? Are you halfway decent? Do we get along with you? Okay, come on. You know, and I mean, good on them for trying to save a dollar, but at the same time, the quality of what you're producing isn't as great as it used to be. The Union Tribune, I still have great respect for it because they're really good journalists who are still there. I was disheartened to hear about what happened to Laura because Laura has been an advocate and a fighter for, underrepresented communities. And I feel like they've made a mistake here, but, I'm not there and I don't know all of what happened, but I believe Laura will, from what she said, what happened. So the editorial page definitely is suffered a huge loss by her leaving or being forced out. That being said, I'm a news junkie, or at least I was up until the last election. And now I don't watch the news the way that I used to. And I think I know I'm part of the problem now because what I do is I go to YouTube and I select the stories that I want to see, but I'm also supporting independent journalists like Joy Reid, like Don Lemon, like Jim Acosta. Like I subscribe to their channels because I believe in their voices and what they're doing. And I know because of their reputations, I can trust what they are saying, and I fear what's going to happen in the future is we're going to all move to that model of independent journalism, or we're independent contractors and these stations contract us to do specific stories instead of having a cohesive unit. That's what I kind of see what's going to happen.
Well, on one hand, I do mourn the days when I mean, CNN was the go-to. Anytime anything happened, right? It was like,
Yep.
oh, CNN. Uh,
Right,
and now I don't watch at all because,
right,
it was like, well, for me, it was, when it started, remember when it was like, what was it it was like being black in America, what it means to be black in America. Do you remember
Hmm.
when that was on? And that was Soledad O'Brien.
Right.
And I mean, now that, and then, and then it was like when, remember when CNN was, what was it, the most trusted name in news?
Yep. In news. Hmm.
Yeah, and it was like, I mean, that was a different time when you had to turn on. And so to get to the point where, okay, Soledad was gone, this one was gone. So by the time, that incident happened with John Lemon, uh, then it was just like, okay, you know what? You
Well,
guys,
let's not all put the shame on CNN. MSNBC did some things with
no, we're
Tiffany.
about to get to them.
Oh, okay. All right.
To get to
Okay.
them. No,
It's your
no, but I'm
show.
just
Run it.
saying, no,
Okay.
I'm saying I saw, no, that I'm just saying what happened with, and then I mean, to the point, I mean, when they had the on-air forum with Trump when he was running, and it was all Republicans were in the audience, and that whole, I mean, it just, all of a sudden CNN took this wide turn. MSNBC became the go-to station.
Right.
And then we were, watching. But I will have to say that when they came for Melissa Harris Perry,
Hmm.
we didn't fuss. We didn't say anything. And I remember that Joy Reid took her place. Now they've come for Joy Reid. They came for Katie Pang. They came. So we have seen this happen. And so now I'm seeing more people being alarmed by what
Well,
happened.
and also look at the misogyny of this. All of these people that you mentioned are women.
Mm.
And some of the men on there still got to keep their shows, and they've done much more controversial stuff. So there's that, mixed into it. Here's what I think, Angela. I feel like if we don't do something now, the First Amendment is going to be lost. Freedom of speech is going to be lost. And, I tell my students, like one of the first things I teach them in my classes is advertising is the fuel in the media machine. The media is a business. And
Mhm.
at the end of the day, they have to make money. And they are not going to risk pissing, I'm sorry to say piss, but that's the word, pissing off their advertisers or upsetting their advertisers because that's what pays the bills. The advertisers right now are afraid of Felon 47. We live in a dictatorship. I'm sorry, America, but that's the truth. We live in a dictatorship now, and people voted for this. But the thing of it is if we don't have a press that serves as watchdogs and lets us know about what is going on, we're in trouble. And it's almost as if the administration, is trying to willfully keep us ignorant so they can do whatever they want to do. And it's almost a playbook out of Hitler's, it's almost like a page out of Hitler's playbook because that's what he did. He intimidated the media capitulated, and then stuff happened, and people are like, oh, I didn't know this was happening. And then it was too late. And I feel like we're going down the same path. The fact that they are trying to intimidate 60 Minutes and CBS because the owner of CBS, she wants this deal to go through, and that's reliant on FCC approval, who is the guy who's a Trump appointee. And so I mean, I pray and I hope this isn't true, but I have a feeling that we're about to see a big change come fall in 60 Minutes. And 60 Minutes has been around for like over 50 years, and it's been one of the most trusted sources. They do the in-depth reporting. They are fair. They are objective. I mean, and I'm sure you remember when 60 Minutes used to be three white men and Andy Rooney, and now they have a Latina, they have black. I mean, it's like it's a diverse group of people, a gay man. They have a group of people that is more representative of America, so we can tell those stories. So I'm keeping a watch on that. And even locally here, there's so many stories that aren't being told, because they just don't have the staff. And that sucks. And as an audience, we're asking for more. We want the latest on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it. We want to see the video and all of this. But when we're not getting the stories told that we want, then we should do something about it. And that support people who tell the stories that we want to hear.
Well, I want to go back to 60 Minutes because the producer just resigned
Right. Mm-hmm.
because he did not want to adhere. So there are people in the who are saying, I'm going to leave rather than capitulate. You
Right.
know, and we saw that happen at the Washington Post. And
Yep.
ironically, the Washington Post, democracy dies in
Guys
dark,
in darkness.
but they basically have gone dark on us. So
Well, because
that's
the
what's
owner's
happened over there,
busy
right?
having a $50 million wedding in Italy this weekend. Yeah, that is very troubling. I mean, I'll admit, I did not watch 1 second of Felon 47's inauguration, but I did see clips of it, and the fact that the oligarchs were standing right there in front of the cabinet should tell people, wait a minute, the rich people are trying to run the country here. The media needs to just, this is our, I feel like, I don't want to say this is our last stand, but I feel like we need to stand up and do something or else we are going to be screwed. And, I'm having, you asked earlier about trusted news sources. I still watch 60 Minutes because I trust them. The local news, I dip in and out. I mainly use YouTube and pick the stories, but I don't sit there like I used to and be like, TV on at 4, goes off at 7, news on in the background. I don't do that anymore. And I think for me, the coverage of political figures in the last election really troubled me. The fact of the whole Jake Tapper, Joe Biden book is very troubling when we have Felon 47 who clearly is having some cognitive, and this is my opinion, so I don't want you to get in trouble with your show, who is true, to me, it looks like he's having some cognitive problems, but that's not being covered the way that it is with Biden, but that's a show for another day.
Jake Tavers, that's to me, I don't know what would make you want to focus on the person who's not there anymore when you have somebody who is there. And I don't know, maybe but I still don't know what happened to his ear in
Oh, okay. So it's funny you said that because I was actually having a conversation with some people about it. So the one thing that well, there was a bunch of things. The fact that we never got a medical report,
Mm-mm.
and the media just let that drop. Um, the shooter, didn't hear anything more about that. A lot of people believe it was a conspiracy, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but if your ear is truly shot off, then we should still see like a piece of it gone, and he looks perfectly fine to me. So I will let you connect your own dots there, but something is not right about the situation, and the media should be exploring that.
Well, the thing is, the
Fact
problem.
that there were allegedly two assassination attempts, then the question is, how could these people get so close to trying to assassinate a presidential candidate? That story seems to have like disappeared too.
Well, my issue is that the lack of coverage and
Oh yeah.
the lack of
Yes.
follow up. So
Yes.
I can't imagine that someone running for president who is now the president, somebody tried to assassinate him. This high caliber bullet blew part of his ear off, and
Allegedly.
never seen the medical report. We don't have. But going back to the first term, that's when the media capitulated at that point.
Yes.
Because I remember there were so many, I can't remember the number. Was it 37,000 lies or something like that?
Yeah.
Remember when the Washington Post was keeping,
Yep.
why do you continue to allow all of this clearly not factual information night after night? And then again, going back to CNN, you had people that were sitting there who every night lied, and they were lies. Okay, they weren't factually incorrect. They were lying night after night. And
Hmm.
where's the producer? Where's the integrity? Where's the anybody? So I saw that happening during the first administration. And so, but then, okay, when the next one came in, suddenly we're fixated on his son's business deals, his son's laptop, everything. But things that happened that were so problematic, somebody who was impeached twice,
Hmm.
and J6. did they not see what happened that day? So to completely it's like the Jedi mind trick, it's like you didn't see what you saw. We're going to completely
Right.
and so, and I feel I put that at the feet of the journalists because aren't you the fourth estate? Aren't you supposed to be the ones to be somehow protecting us? And as for the advertising revenue part of it, when I worked in the old days, editorial and advertising was separate.
Mm-hmm.
And the advertising did not have say so and sway over editorial. Editorial had the power to decide who was going on the cover, what stories
Right.
were going to be written. Now, the revenue side is making the dictation to
Mm-hmm.
those things.
Mm-hmm. Again, I feel like 2008 was the turning point
Mm.
because again, that's when, they realized we need this money to continue. Part of this is they don't have the staffs, like I said earlier, the way they used to, and they don't have the experienced journalists the way that they used to. Because the questions that you're asking, we're asking too as experienced journalists, but these younger people, they're not asking those questions. They're like, I got another story to do. I got to get to the next thing. I got to get to the next thing. My editor is breathing on my neck, and I've got to tweet this out. So they don't have the time to really process, wait, this story has legs. If this happens, this means this happened. This means this happened. For example, I'm going to bring it locally. We had that really bad plane crash. What was that? Maybe like a month ago now. And, yeah, they were there the first day, like, oh, look how horrible and bad this is. Okay. Then there was a why did this happen sort of story. And then that's it. No more. Well, what are the people in the neighborhood doing? Are the insurance companies coming through? And these are military families, I think, from what I understand. But these stories aren't being followed up because they just have to move on to the next thing. And let's not forget, Pete Hegseth has just been in all sorts of trouble and it's like, oh, I'm sharing classified information on Signal. And that was a story for like a day or two, and then they moved on. And it's like, but no, this issue still remains that he did this. What are the repercussions? And Caroline comes out every day in front of the press corps and just spouts lies upon lies upon lies. And if you remember our last press secretary,
Mhm.
black woman,
Yes.
lesbian, they would rip her a new one every day. And she handled that. Now, I don't know her from Adam, but I know of her reputation. She handled that with elegance, with class. She did not show them angry black woman, although I'm sure she was. And this young girl, she's what, 27? I mean, she just barely got, you can still smell Simulac on this girl's breath, but yet she's the press secretary. And it's like, I got thoughts older than you. How you shouldn't be telling me anything. But these are the people that he's chosen to surround him. And these, I'm just going to call them incompetent people, are controlling this country. And the media is just like, okay,
Asleep at the wheel.
yeah,
I will say that. I just want to give a disclaimer for a moment. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit
yes,
radio
you are.
station, and so the opinions of our guest are the opinions of our guest. So, but I want to say something about what's going on with immigration because us being right here by the border, uh, ICE came into a local community
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
got everybody that was working in the restaurant and zip tied I mean, this is unbelievable that it's come to this point. And then you see, I don't know if every day it's a different one, but I just saw one the other day where the mask ICE people grabbed this woman. I guess she was selling her fruit on the street, and they threw her, and she was holding onto a tree, and everybody is saying, where's your badges? Who are you? You don't have the right to take her. And they grabbed her and threw her into, the van and took her away. These mass people that no one even knows if they even really are ICE or not. And this is a crisis. And I don't feel like the media is alarming all the bells now of what is going on. people are being snatched, and some of these people are citizens. They won't even let them get their ID out or anything. And then they're taken to some place where nobody knows where they're being kept. And they, so this is extremely beyond troubling. And I'm feeling that the media is not making this into the big story that it needs to be. Am
Because
I
they don't
am
have
I
the,
missing something?
no, you're not. But again, they don't have the staff and they don't have the time. And
Or
that's
but they don't have the
sad.
will. It's the
Yeah.
will. Because
Yeah,
it only takes one righteous person to do the right thing.
that's true.
Okay. So, they don't have, I mean, well, we see what happened to Laura and Terry Moran and Don Lemon and, so
Mhm.
Jim Acosta. So I guess we see what happens to the righteous people, right?
But
So,
you know what? A lot of them will come out better on the other side. I mean, Don Lemon is thriving on his station. And, again, he had the reputation and
mhm.
people followed him. Joy is going to be very successful because she had the reputation. People are going to follow her. And I think the thing of it is as an audience and as media consumers, you have to support the people who are doing, I'm gonna use your words, the righteous thing, and you berate them for the work that they do, who I wouldn't stay, I would be like, I'm out of here. But I guess I'm a unicorn because I'm still passionate about journalism. I mean, other than my husband, journalism is the love of my life. I still am active in it. I teach my students well. A lot of my students are in these newsrooms and they're doing well, and it's because of my dedication, my desire to teach them, and I still watch out over them. They'll come to me and say, "Oh, this situation happened." And I'm like, "Okay, this is what you should do." And I advise them. And then some of them, they hate me while they're in class with me, but I cannot tell you the number of them who said, "Professor, you said this was going to happen, and then it happened, and I knew what to do."
Mm.
So you and I, when we were coming up, journalism was just this fantastic, noble career. And we are storytellers, and we thought this is a fit for us. So we need to make sure that those who are coming behind us see it the same way, see the magic, see the luster, see the power that this career holds.
Well, thank you. That was very well said. And I will just add that we have to play the long game
Yeah,
as others have,
yeah,
because they deliberately set out to put people in newsrooms to change the narrative and control
yeah,
what was being fed to people.
yeah,
And so we've got to really be more strategic
yeah.
in getting our story being told. And so more, I want to see more Black people having their own Substacks and YouTube channel, because if that's where
Oh,
the
it's
eyeballs
going to
are, then
happen.
then,
It's
then we
going to
need to
happen.
we need to be there with our stories there too.
Yeah, and I think it's happening. I think more people are recognizing that traditional newsrooms is not the way I want to go.
Mhm.
So if I create my own Substack, I create my own YouTube. I tell my students like this my your smartphone is your portable newsroom. I mean,
Mhm.
you can write, you can edit, you can shoot, you can do all of these things. You can control your content. And the thing of it is if you produce good content, truthful content, people will follow you. They will, because people are thirsty for the truth. Well, most people are thirsty for the truth.
But you were right about, I feel very strongly about people having trusted sources.
Yeah,
And so following, Joy Reid and Don Lemon and Jim Acosta, having the trust and the faith in them. And
yeah.
so before we go, anything else you want to share with our listeners and viewers?
Yes, I appreciate you and what you're doing here because you're creating a safe space for people to have these conversations that are needed to be had. I also want people not to give up on the media. I know we're living in scary times right now, unprecedented scary times right now, but there are some hardworking journalists who are out there who are trying to fight the fight. And the thing of it is, in order to keep them, we need to support them.
Well, thank you, Jerry McCormick, for being my guest today on Woman of Color Roar Media Show. And I appreciate you and all your experience and wisdom and your willingness to teach and to share that. So thank you for being on the show today. This is Angela D. Joseph, Women of Color Roar Radio Show. And today we were talking about journalism. And this is the show that you're going to hear things that you won't hear anywhere else. Thank you for watching.